No longer at ease, Egypt warns about deteriorating ties with the United States. Closing in on this suspect, cash reward offered as investigations into child killer in South Africa intensify. And dash to ensure happiness, why many African migrants are risking it all to escape from the continent. You're watching Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Penina Karibe in Nairobi. We also have these stories coming up. Setback for South Africa's Massmart Holdings as Kenyan retail chain Naivas calls of talks on takeover. And trendsetter, South Africa's Lucas Sithole hopes to inspire others in the continent with his success in wheelchair tennis. We begin in Egypt, where the country's foreign minister Nabil Fahmy says relations between Cairo and the United States are in turmoil. He told state-owned Al Ahram newspaper on Wednesday that there is unrest in relations between the two countries, warning that the strain could affect the whole Middle East region. However, Fahmy said he was not worried about this turmoil in relations because it's also a chance for the two nations to better evaluate their relationship in the future. This follows Washington's decision to suspend delivery of tanks, helicopters and fighter jets to his country. The U.S. suspended hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to the Egyptian military after the July 3rd military coup that ousted Mohamed Morsi, the country's first democratically elected president. Hundreds of protesters were subsequently killed in police crackdowns targeting the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, Egypt has for decades been among the largest recipients of U.S. military and economic aid. This is largely because of its 1979 peace treaty with Israel, which made it to withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula it had seized from Egypt in 1967. The United States has long provided Egypt with about $1.5 billion in annual aid, including $1.3 billion for the military. However, in July 2013, following the ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi by the military, the U.S. vocalized its unhappiness with the aid freeze. On 10th October, Washington decided to suspend some of its annual military aid to the country until it ushers in a democratic government. On the 16th of October, Egypt criticized the U.S. decision to suspend large parts of the military aid following months of political turmoil. Now, for further analysis of this situation, we are joined live from Cairo by Mohamed Abdel Nabi, advisor at the Ministry of Finance. We are also joined by Daniel Whitehead in Washington, D.C. Thank you both for joining us. And let me begin with you, Mr. Nabi. Egypt has been the second largest recipient of U.S. aid after Israel. Where is the country going to turn to next for military assistance?
Thank you very much. Egypt now has a many military factors, and it make the Egyptian army can get his needs from that factors. So at any time, any country go in this place, they can go to Russia, go to Europe, or another, a lot of places the Egyptian army can get his needs from it.
Daniel Whitehead there in Washington, let me cross over to you now. And Egypt's foreign minister has said that there is unrest in relations between the two countries, and he is in fact warning that that strain could affect the whole Middle East region. So how is Washington responding to this?
Well, this decision to cut aid from Washington came from Washington's unhappiness that Mohamed Morsi, the freely elected president, was ousted by the army. The Secretary of State, John Kerry, has been keen to push that this is not a permanent move. What he says and what the US government says is they are holding the aid until inclusive, democratically elected civilian government comes to force through a free and fair election. This is certainly a signal to Egypt that it is not 100% happy with the course it is taking and where it is going. But the US by no means is naive to the fact that what it does has a wider impact on the Middle East. So it is treading carefully, and John Kerry is putting out that message that by no means is this a permanent move or a restructure to the overall relationship between the US and Egypt.
Mr. Nabil, let me come back to you. So now that the US has cut some aid to the Egyptian military, how do you think this will affect the military operations there in Egypt?
I think now we in peace time, and that will be not affect or a lot of effect in the Egyptian army. But I think all the Egyptian people want to see the relationship between USA and Egypt back in the normal, as the normal, and I think the Egyptian army will not be in the authority, so it will be back in the democracy way, and I think if we do that, everything will be okay.
All right, so now at this moment, let me rope in Matthew Kalman. He's joining us live from Jerusalem. Matthew, thanks for joining us. Now, there are fears if Egypt is not properly secured, it may compromise the security of Israel. How has the aid withdrawal been received there in Israel?
Well, the Israeli defense minister and a senior official from the defense ministry, Amos Gilad, spent a few weeks in America earlier this year trying to persuade the Americans not to cut off aid from Egypt, and it seems that they failed in that mission. And behind the scenes, the Israelis are describing President Obama in his attitude to Egypt as clueless. They say that the reduction in military aid to the Egyptian army will threaten the stability of the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. And if that happens, then it could threaten the stability of other peace treaties that Israel has, most notably with Jordan. So the Israelis are very dismayed and very upset by this decision, and they think that the Americans are making a very big mistake.
All right, quite a precarious situation there indeed. I have to thank you all for joining us. Mohammed Abdel Nabi live in Cairo, Daniel Whitehead in Washington, and Matthew Kalman just joining us from Jerusalem. Now to Ethiopia now, where 3 people have been arrested in connection with a suspected suicide bomb plot. Police say the target was soccer fans who gathered to watch Sunday's World Cup qualifier football match between Ethiopia and Nigeria. CCTV's Gurum Chala has more.
The story around this incident has changed in recent days, but what authorities say now is that Sunday's explosion in a marked part of the capital was indeed a failed suicide bomb attempt. They say 2 Somali men were killed by their own homemade bomb. When police raided their rented house, they found grenades, a revolver and more explosives. The dead men reportedly were dressed as football fans. Now, no one has claimed responsibility. Authorities are investigating. What we do know, though, is that Ethiopia has forces fighting over the border in Somalia, and that Somali group Al-Shabaab has been threatening retaliatory attacks. Grumjala CCTV, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
South African police are offering a $10,000 reward in the hunt for a suspected child killer in a township north of Johannesburg. The mutilated bodies of 2 little girls were found earlier this week. The incident in Diepsloot triggered rioting, and foreigners are in the firing line. CCTV's Guy Henderson has this update.
4 foreign nationals are still being questioned by police in relation to this case, but the prime suspect is still on the run. Police say that they suspect that he may have killed before, so we could be dealing with a serial killer. This is because the body of a 5-year-old girl was found just 100 meters away from this latest crime scene barely a month ago. On Thursday morning, police released an ID kit of this prime suspect. They say he's in his early 30s, that he has a light complexion and also a distinctive cut on his lower lip. They've also spread the net wide in terms of where he could possibly originally be from. Officially on this ID kit, they say South Africa and Swaziland is most likely, but I spoke to their spokesman a few days ago who said he still wasn't counting out that Mozambique connection. In the meantime, the community here are calm for now, but I think there is still some tension in the area. There's not a lot of confidence in the police around Deep Sloot, which does have an extremely high rate of crime, and there are also xenophobic undertones emerging amongst the community here, many foreign nationals living in the area. So it is calm for now, and police are urging residents to remain calm, but if there isn't progress fairly soon, that could change. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Deep Sloot, South Africa.
Let's discuss this incident further with Kawin Lebone, a crime analyst with the South African Institute of Race Relations. He is live in Johannesburg. Mr. Lebone, thanks for joining us. Now, a rising crime is being witnessed there in South Africa. Is the government overwhelmed by incidences of insecurity?
I couldn't catch you clearly on that question, ma'am.
Mr. Lebone just saying that there is a rise in insecurity there is in South Africa, and putting a question to you whether the South African government is indeed overwhelmed by this rise of insecurity.
Okay, well, firstly, to correct what you've just said, ma'am, there has not been a rise in crime in the long term in South Africa. If you look at the long-term trends, you will find that 17 of the serious crimes in South Africa have gone down between 1994 and the previous financial year. It's only that of concern, aggravated robbery has not gone down throughout all the years. It has been rising all throughout since 1994. And of concern, another again, is that for the first time in about 8 years, the murder rate increased from year to year between 2012 and 2013. Having said that, we have one of the highest crime rates in the world. That has always been a concern. The authorities have told the South African public that they are on top of the crime situation in the country, and that all the statistics that I'm mentioning now are a sign that they are getting on top of the situation and that they will tackle crime and bring it down. But yes, we have one of the highest crime rates in the world, and that is what is a problem in South Africa.
So you did mention there that much as crime rates are coming down, cases of aggravated robbery and murder are on the rise. So what would you say are the factors contributing to this rise?
Well, it depends on what crime categories you are talking about. If we take the group of crimes that fall under property crimes, those can be attributed to the South African society. We have one of the most unequal societies in the world. We are up there with countries like Brazil, and that has been shown to have a contribution as well to property crimes, the level of inequality in a society. When it comes to crimes such as crimes against the person, that is your murder and aggravated robberies, as well as serious assaults, we come from a history of violence. If we remember very well, the previous government used violence a lot to suppress the aspirations of the majority of society, and the response as well from the liberation movements at the time was to also use violence to try and achieve their aims, political aims. And so with such a history, the perception might have grown in the general population that violence is the best means to achieve an end.
All right, Mr. Kawin Lebone, live for us there in Johannesburg. Thank you for joining us. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take our first break this hour. Coming up, dash to ensure happiness, why many African migrants are risking it all to escape from the continent.
This week, Talk Africa is in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, following the developments of Africa's relationship with the International Criminal Court.
This is a billion-euro industry.
What is at stake for Africa?
Sitting heads of state have immunity.
We need a deferral.
What is at stake for the ICC?
The ICC itself is actually unaccountable.
Why is it that ICC is only focused on certain countries in Africa?
So what exactly is that relationship between Africa and the ICC?
deaths of around 350 migrants off the small island of Lampedusa in southern Italy early this month has brought the issue of illegal migration across the Mediterranean sharply back into focus. Italy has declared a state of emergency in Sicily following the disaster and has called on the European Union to provide more funds to help deal with the wave of migrants arriving on its shores on an almost daily basis. CCTV's Kate Parkinson now reports from Lampedusa.
Lampedusa is struggling to cope with the number of migrants arriving here. This centre is often 4 or 5 times over capacity. It has space for just 250 people, but there are currently more than 800 here.
This tiny island has long been a destination for migrants from Africa, fleeing poverty, desperation, conflict and persecution. But recently there has been a significant increase in the number of people arriving from Syria.
This boat full of Syrians arrived on the island on Monday, taking the same perilous journey that has killed over 350 people this month alone. Yaman tells me he knew it was dangerous, but it was a risk worth taking.
Life is not easy, and the risk exists in any place. Even if we were outside of Syria and immigration, okay, into the sea by boat, no less dangerous the life with we live in Syria.
They may be safe on land now, but life in Lampedusa is not easy.
We know that there are families that in Syria had a good life, and they should have the opportunity to have a good life too in other European countries where their family members are based.
The United Nations has urged Italy to transfer Lampedusa migrants to other centres in Italy after 48 hours. But in reality, most stay here for much longer.
There are people arriving from the sea like shipwrecks and are not even able to guarantee them a bed. It's not a dignified welcome. This is a painful issue for Italy. In this case, it is not Europe's responsibility. It is an Italian problem regarding our reception system. Lampedusa has to be just a place where people arrive and receive first assistance, and then they should be able to continue the journey.
There are calls for Europe-wide action to tackle the mass migration issue. But for now, the future for these people remains uncertain. Kate Parkinson, CCTV, Lampedusa in Italy.
In other news making headlines across the continent, the United Nations has appealed for more troops and helicopters for its peacekeeping mission in Mali. The UN says it needs more resources to effectively stabilize the north of the country and protect civilians from attacks by Islamic extremists and armed groups. The UN force known as MINUSMA assumed authority on July 1st from a UN-backed African force in Mali. But while the UN Security Council mandated nearly a 13,000-strong force, there are only about 5,000 troops on the ground. Elsewhere, tens of thousands of people have been forced to flee from what is being described as unprecedented levels of violence in the Central African Republic. Workers of the medical charity Medicines Sans Frontières say they had seen appalling scenes of murder in a wave of attacks. Entire villages had been burned to the ground and people have been treated for gunshot and machete wounds. The mineral-rich but underdeveloped country has been in a state of chaos since rebels seized power in March. A rebel alliance commanded by Michel Jotodia, who is now interim president, ousted Francois Bozizé. And finally, the United Nations mission in Darfur, Joint Special Representative Mohamed Chambers has condemned an attack by unidentified armed assailants in West Darfur. He urged the government of Sudan to investigate and bring the perpetrators to justice. 3 peacekeepers serving under UNAMID were killed and armed gunmen ambushed after Senegalese peacekeepers as they escorted a water convoy from El Geneina town over the weekend. All right, a snapshot of what's happening in the bees world. Rama is here with that.
Thank you very much, Penina. Here's what's coming up on Biz Africa.